It's time to move on to our next big segment, which is Fireside Chat. And Deepthi is going to lead the conversation with Manish Chandra and Kanwal Rekhi, and it is going to be about building unicorns, the battle for billions. Deepthi, take it away.
Thank you all. Hi, I'm Dipti Desai, and as a board member of IIT Bay Area Association, I have the pleasure of welcoming Kanwal Rekhi, who is the first Silicon Valley Indo-American founder and CEO to take a venture-backed company public on NASDAQ, and Manish Chandra, founder and CEO of Poshmark, that just went IPO amidst the pandemic in January 2021. They're both graduates of IIT, so you're in good company here. And it is rewarding to hear them speak at the IIT Bay Area Leadership Conference being held virtually today. Kanwal is a mentor and advisor to many successful entrepreneurs, including Manish, and he's also a high-profile super angel. He was instrumental in co-founding and making and leading TIE, which is the Indus Entrepreneur, into the largest global mentoring network for Indian entrepreneurs. Manish Chandra, on the other side of the coin, is the founder and CEO of Poshmark and is responsible for guiding the vision, the strategy, and the growth of the company. Manish has applied over 20 years of experience building and scaling companies. And he actually moved from enterprise to consumer, which is like a very bold move. And he created this social marketplace that brings together the human connection of a physical shopping experience, which I think all the women here might relate to with the scale, reach, ease, and selection benefits of e-commerce. So while Manish is a serial entrepreneur, Kanwal is a serial investor. They're both iconic industry leaders, and together today they will talk about what it takes to build unicorns and the battle for billions. Kanwal and Manish both have a unique perspective. Like I'd mentioned, they're like two sides of a coin. They're mentor and mentee. They're the entrepreneur and the investor. And today we will have the opportunity to hear from them on their journeys, their perspectives, and their thoughts and ideas on building unicorns and battling for them. I have the privilege of moderating this session, and I will ask a few questions. But the audience, we want to hear from you. So please post your questions and we will get them addressed. There's a Q&A box, and so you can ask your questions there and they will be transported to us via chat. My first question, while we wait for the audience to bring in theirs, is to Kanwal. Kanwal, you have a very rich and fulfilling life as an entrepreneur and an investor. Can you share some highlights of this journey with the audience over here?
I guess I am an open book. I have been speaking, talking to people forever, right? But I am one of the most unlikely entrepreneurs. I come from an army family. My father was in the army. My two elder brothers were in the army. They went to ND and IMA, and I was a little bit bookish, and I disappointed my father. When I went to IIT instead of to one of the military academies, and but IITs were just the right place for me. Intellectual places. I ended up in California in 1971. Before even the Apple and others are late startups. Intel was startup that year, and I was a hardcore engineer for 10 years almost. And one of my underlings became an entrepreneur in around 1980, 81. And I kept saying, why can't I be an entrepreneur? And it was a very strange thing because there was no family history of business. But I could not be, I was destabilized as an individual. David Jackson, who worked for me, went on to start a company called Altos Computers. Some of you will might remember Altos was one of the first hard parts. Z80 was CPM machine. And I kept saying, why aren't Indians entrepreneurs? Why can't I be an entrepreneur? And I had to give it a try in 1981. And 1981 was the year when the world changed. IBM PC was introduced that year. And Ethernet specifications were put in public domain by Intel, Xerox, and Digital. And I saw the opportunity. Why not why not network all these computers? I had no background in networking at all. I was a logic designer, system designer, but being an IIT, and I was a fast learner. So we were a pioneer in computer networking back in 1982 when our company was launched. So, and I have never looked back since then.
So great. And you were instrumental.
And by the way, we went public in 1987.
Yes.
Approximately on February 27th.
And it's been addictive journey since then. Manish, you are a seasoned and serial successful entrepreneur. Can you share your journey with the audience here? Because you also, just like Kanwal, had a very rich history and journey.
Yeah, for me, I grew up in India, and my dad was a judge, very similar to Kanwal. My family was not at all on the dad's side, was not at all on the entrepreneurship side. Although my mother's father, my nana, was actually a pharmacist. So I spent quite a few summers in Chandni Chowk, seeing sort of people buy and sell and transact. That kind of left a deep impression in my psyche in terms of how the future would be shaped. Came here, finished my IIT, came here, and my first job was actually at Intel, doing semiconductor design databases. So today, if you sort of think of me helping people buy and sell shoes and clothes and jewelry, it would not be a very linear journey. But as we know, in Silicon Valley, those journeys are really possible. And I would say, there's few things that have been really key. I think having the IIT community has been very center point. So many of the people I drew on early on came from the IIT community, including Kanwal. And then the second thing, which is, it's sort of a very foundational institution in Silicon Valley, is TIE. And TIE was very instrumental, particularly for my first company in raising money and shaping it. That was all the way back in 2005, where Kanwal was one of the first checks that came into the company and a commitment, but also Professor Rajiv Motwani, who's passed away since then from IIT Kanpur, was involved in the company, and many others, including Ashish Gupta, who's also from IIT Kanpur. So these networks, I think, end up defining you in a big way. The thing that I had to do really in switching from a very enterprise software focus, which is where I spent first 10, 15 years in database companies and application software companies, to consumer, was a fairly big shift. And it's actually, now that I'm on this side for the last 15 years, it's hard to sort of think what that thing was like. And one of my consumer sort of people that I look up to had this to say about switching from enterprise to consumer was really, in enterprise, it is about productivity. It's about sort of that impact, whereas consumer is a lot more about connecting at a deeper level with the emotion of the consumer and thinking about that. The other thing I wanted to just share in terms of my career and journey highlights is that I got, very early on, a very interesting flavor of success, which is the very first company I joined after Intel was a company called Sybase, which some of you may remember. And that ended up going public. I joined them, were about 80 people, and that ended up going public. What's interesting is I joined them when I was unwittingly seeing the first recession in Silicon Valley, which I didn't know. I was so young. I joined this company, and the CEO in the first happy hour announced that they were unsuccessful in getting financing. They were operating on venture debt. I had no sense like what that meant. I was just very happy. I was in Berkeley. I was getting a paycheck. I was attending a happy hour, coding away merrily. So the thing that I learned from that is, sometimes the best companies get created in some of these really challenging times and allows you to move forward. And then the last thing I wanted to share about my journey is that so much of what I have done has been centered around building communities. And if you think of Poshmark in so many ways, it is a community of people coming together to buy and sell. And there's deep engagement that you see in the platform. So my passion more than anything is helping people come together and helping communities form in various ways.
That's so true. So it's great. I mean, it's the networking communities that have actually helped grow both Kanwal and Manish in their journeys, and the IITs and the ties have really been instrumental. It's really rewarding to hear that there is a purpose for these organizations to exist and bring the
Deepti, I want to make one point. My journey was very lonely. There was no IIT community. There was no tie.
help create.
There were no Indian business people. There were no Indian sales people, no Indian marketing people. My journey was super lonely. And so, but some of the later inspiration came from being, it shouldn't have been that lonely. And we need to build our own infrastructure, and that was the basis of vitamin, both Ban IIT movement and Thai movement, where I was involved from the very start on both sides.
Almost 30 years ago now. Yeah. And it's great. It has really benefited a lot of people. So it's the mentor and the mentee, right? And going back to that, Kanwal, I would love to ask this question is, why would seasoned entrepreneurs like Manish, who's really made impact himself, who have had successful startups, need mentors? What is it that you as an individual bring to them? And they really, they love to interact with you. So there's obviously something that you're providing to them that is very valuable.
Well, so, and I mean, Manish will have to answer that one, but I'll tell you from my perspective, a CEO, an entrepreneur is a very lonely person. He doesn't have too many people he can talk to, his inner feelings, inner thoughts, inner fears. And he's supposed to be seen as a know-it-all boss, who knows what's going on, what needs to happen, and he has to keep his own misgivings, his own fears sort of hidden. A mentor provides an outlet, where you can speak freely, talk freely without being, you have been judged in some fashion, but without feeling. You will expose any weaknesses.
Yeah. So they feel like
it's a sounding board.
Yeah, I'll take it. I think Kanwal has been mentoring. I've been a mentee and growing, and I have mentored as well. I think for a business, for a human being, for a company to keep growing, the person who's leading it has to keep growing. So he or she has to continue to grow, and to grow, you need partnership, you need mentorship. You can't just grow alone. And there's many kinds of mentorship, right? So with Kanwal, I formed a really great relationship from my very first company, but I actually knew him from even a company before, where we didn't know each other that well in that company, but when I started my first company, at that time, we really became strong partners. And there are many ups and downs that you go through, and having mentors allows you to connect in a very deep way. For example, one of Kanwal's wisdom point that keeps coming back again, in fact, an entrepreneur I'm working with right now, is probably the biggest wisdom I can give him consistently, is called avoiding the YAFO syndrome, which is, Kanwal can probably articulate it even better than I am, but it's very important. It's called yet another effing opportunity syndrome, where you build your product. And I think Nidhi has this question, can you become a big idea? A lot of times you think doing many things will make it big, but many things only makes you diffused, whereas actually the journey of becoming big is continuously simplifying and refining and focusing on what you want to do rather than diffusion. Diffusion is actually a way to waste capital. But the other thing which is there is that there's different kinds of mentorship. There's guru-style mentorship. There's also peer-style mentorship. I'm part of a group called 10X CEO, where 6 or 7 CEOs are at different scale get together, and we produce a case study. We have our business metrics, and each person gives an advice. Now, if you think about 6 or 7 half of them are running public companies, getting their time in a board thing is impossible. But this thing is really, really powerful because you get that extra time. And the reason you get that time is because you're giving your time. So it's kind of a barter mentorship that you get. So there's various kinds of things. And I think if you are too seasoned to get mentorship, then you've stopped growing in my mind.
Mentoring is a catalyst for growth, right? So, yeah.
Every day is a new experience.
Yeah.
Every day is a new experience. Your company doubles in size. Now you have to manage twice as complex a business with twice as many people under you, and in the same amount of time that you had before. So you have to change. You have to become a different person. Yeah. And one of the things I tell people is you start managing by numbers. Yeah, you start managing by abstractions rather than being micromanager of things. Set the goals, set the numbers. And it's Manish has heard of me. Lesson I learned from one of my my board members back in 1985. He said, yada yada yada. Spare me the story. Show me the numbers. So he would say that your numbers should speak your story, and everything else is just fluff. And I have totally internalized my life around numbers. Everything must come to the numbers, and I tell that to Manish. Anybody, set the goals, follow the numbers. Don't be easy on yourself. Don't be easy on your people. If numbers didn't happen, you have to find out why. Were you wrong? So the other things, but in my case, I'll tell you my journey. I was a hardware engineer, got into computer networking, got into software, became entrepreneur angels, VC, and I was a startup guy. At Novell, I was almost running as the president of the company, not the CEO, a $3 billion corporation. So I had a span of experience, which very few people.
A lot of hats.
A lot of hats with. So I have learned to become very, very abstract in my approach. As a result.
So I want to ask this last question, and then I'm going to focus on all the questions coming in, and there's a lot of them pouring in. So, we're talking about building unicorns, and to build a unicorn, Kanwal, I heard you say that you really need to find either a large emerging market or a market transition. As an investor that you have become today, how do you identify these large emerging markets and market transitions that are going to happen? I mean, do you have this crystal ball that sees into the future?
So I'll tell you that I have missed many opportunities because I wasn't smart enough to see them emerge. When people would come and talk to me about social networking, about 2001, 2002, 2003, I couldn't understand what they were saying. So there are transitions that happen. You're not able to see, but once I've seen them, it expands your horizon. The consumer opportunities are by and large, by definition, potentially very large opportunities. If you hit the right notes, and as we have seen with e-commerce and all that, to make. By the way, entrepreneurs have trouble competing in a static market, things which are not changing. Because the big guys with the big set of resources will always steamroll you. But when things are changing, our beauty is that world is changing because of technology alone, let alone everything else. Technology is unsettling all the old equations, and the opportunities emerge because of that change. That entrepreneurs can exploit because they can move fast. They have no inertia, and the big companies have a long tail, long inertia. They cannot move fast by definition. And selling and buying and selling online is a new experience. Macy's and all those just got destabilized, right? So I've learned now that you have to have a region. Why is this opportunity real? And of course, the old order will be replaced by new, and you can very quickly size up the opportunity because all that business will turn this way, right?
And you caught that one with Poshmark, right? So, Manish.
Poshmark was Poshmark. And again, by the way, there has to be an opening. You cannot. Poshmark's opening was, can I find a way? Maybe second-hand clothing. There wasn't. So once you start to build a community, start to build a platform, you can do more things, but you need to find an opening where it's easy for you. Yeah.
Possible.
Yeah.
So I actually did want to ask this question to Manish, that you were able to tap into your experience of building and scaling companies. And you created this social marketplace that brought together this human connection, the shopping experience, which is physical, to this virtual scale, reach, ease, and selection that made e-commerce, make your platform viable and successful. How did you make this happen? What were your, thought processes that were going on? How did you figure this out and say, this is the way to go?
We relied at that time. There were a few things that were happening. In my previous company, Caboodle, it was all around social connection, around shopping, but there was no transaction happening on the platform. So a lot of the monetization was happening through advertising. And then a lot of people wanted to use it to buy and sell stuff that they owned. And I was looking at the disruption that was happening in the broader marketplace. And I said, there's an opportunity here. And when you sort of turn into your own closet, there was so much stuff sitting there, mine, my wife's, and just there were bags that were unopened. So that was sort of one side of the opportunity. Second thing was seeing shopping, which was extremely unsocial still. After us at Caboodle tried to do it, was still a very unsocial experience, particularly around the transaction side. But there were still friction points. How do you upload inventory? What do you do with that? And then in 2010, I saw iPhone 4, which was really this small at that point in time. Very few people had it, but it allowed you to take amazing photos, and it was allowed you to consume very quickly. And I was at my son's high school football game, and the homecoming queen was wearing this beautiful dress. And I was talking to her parents, and they said, she thrifted that dress. So then everything between the iPhone, that dress, it all just clicked together. And it became clear that the technology is right. There is a general movement happening in millennials and Gen Z moving towards secondhand shopping, and phone really enabled it. And so we bet it. We bet, the bets we made was it's going to be very social. Initially, we only had an iPhone app. There was no web app. There was hardly Android, was not even present. And then the third thing was we would take care of everything related to transactions. Now, these were three big bets. Each of them took many years to sort of prove out. But one of the interesting things that happened with the iPhone was that as we started to think about taking the product to the community, to the people who wanted to use it, many people didn't have an iPhone. So we had to hack the usage of iPhone at that time. So there was something called an iPod video, which had all the functionality of iPhone except the phone subscription plan. So we went out and bought a bunch of these devices and literally gave them on loan to users to buy and sell on them. And that's how we sort of jump-started the marketplace, through physical events, community events, etc. And then at various points, there were different points of inflection that came. But the early part was really betting on a very core belief. And again, leaving it very focused, as Kanwal says, trying to avoid the Yahoo syndrome and keeping, we initially focused on women, on iPhone, on social, and really just very specific sort of thing. And that allowed us to sort of scale and do that. The one point I would say for any consumer entrepreneurs that are in the audience is that the first thing you want to measure with your product is love, is the level of engagement that you have in the product. And for us, very early on, we saw 18, 19 minutes a day of engagement on the platform, which has since then scaled to over 20 minutes of engagement a day. But that was very key for us, because in the early days, we didn't have shipping fully working, payments fully working, but that sort of gave us the confidence to go forward.
Yeah.
You made these shopping parties possible through technology that made it really addictive for people to keep on getting those not used or not frequently used items that were sitting in somebody's closet. And it's a win-win-win. Right? So, Kanwal, I'm looking for questions here. There is one on says, what is the one idea or person or book that has the most profound impact on your life to become who you are at your deepest level? Kanwal, you want to take this first?
I've been so searching. I am, like I said, most unlikely entrepreneur, most likely person I became at the end. But I think my father, as I grow, and see what he achieved, I am amazed. So my father, was he went to war as a young foot soldier. and he came back 4 years later as a Subedar in 1945, 40. And at the time of the independence, he became, he did the emergency commission and became second lieutenant. And he was only about 32, 33 when the partition happened. And he brought a massive family. I looked back, his parents, his brothers, his own wife and 4 children, like 30 people. He became in charge and brought them over the border from Pakistan, Rawalpindi, which is on the far side of Pakistan, to India. And then he went back a couple of times to bring his granduncles and their families. And I looked back, I said, why, it's amazing. And of course, after the partition, there was a huge emphasis on education. So I think I got defined as a person at IIT. And if very few people know, my name at IIT was Mr. Fundasent. I would talk about fundas being clear. At IIT Bombay, so I was known as a Fundasent. Because I always said, what are the fundas here? And I have never forgotten that. Entrepreneurs, I hate entrepreneurs who cannot tell me what they're doing in like 3 or 4 sentences. You got to distill your ideas down, and then you distill it until there's a clarity. You try to sound bite. Because that's what's required. To do what needs to happen. And in my case, my fundas are always clear. I zero in on why this is different. Me too, and a day late ideas don't cut it. Right?
Yeah. And I guess, Manish, the same question. I know we have very limited time and there's so many questions pouring in, but what has impacted your life? A person, a book, something else? And then I also wanted to ask another question. What was the biggest setback that has changed the journey going forward, possibly?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the setbacks. I'll certainly share the books and the background, but I think, look, I feel like the mindset that I've adopted is very much about adaptability. And there's been many ups and downs in life. Today we're sort of going through this amazing boom period in Silicon Valley where things are just, up and up and everything sort of feels like up and to the right. And there was another golden era, which Kanwal very well remember, back in 98, 99, 2000, where everything felt like was going up and to the right. And then it all came crashing down in a big way in 2000, late 2000, 2001. And we went from a place where there was tremendous job opportunity to sort of thinking that why would anybody hire an engineer in Silicon Valley? A lot of engineers were leaving. I was struggling at that time with sort of finding the job because every job felt very unstable. So I ended up doing something very interesting, which is I was at that time focused on products and marketing, and a lot of CEOs, I wanted to partner with them, wanted to partner with me. So instead of sort of joining one company, I ended up time slicing myself and becoming an Amazon Web Services time slicing with a bunch of CEOs out there, which ended up creating actually exponentially more value because I was able to sort of diversify my portfolio. And then even in that process, acted like an investment banker and brought 2 companies together. So in some ways, that setback of sort of being in this very depressing time in the history of Silicon Valley allowed me to be very flexible, adaptable, and find inner strength. And that gave me further on the confidence to then start my own company later on, and also gave me deeper connections with people like Kanwal, et cetera. I actually got very deeply involved with Thai as well. We ended up starting one of the first Thai internet special interest group. It was funny because we had come out of the age of internet, but Thai did not have an internet special interest group. We had networks and all of that. So I think the adaptability part is super key when you think about the setbacks. My big book that I personally look to and read many, many times, and I've actually handed it out to folks at the company at many times, is a book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, which really talks about that, everything you look outside kind of spiritually is inside, and many times your journeys that take outside come back to your core. So going back to, I think, one of the questions that was asked is, how can an idea be very big? I think really the idea itself is not big. It's how the entrepreneur molds that idea that makes it big, because somebody looked at that coffee cup and saw a coffee cart. Somebody thought of it as a couple of coffee shops, but somebody imagined a whole Starbucks in it. So when you think of your closet, it could be anything, but it can also be a marketplace that can bring 80 million people together.
Let your imagination go wild, right? Yeah, and things will happen. I just have time for one more question, and I think I'll tie two questions together. It's about the background and networks for Kanwal, and then I'll follow it up for a question with a question for Manish. So, Kanwal, you are a networking guru of the 80s, right? And the world has changed a lot. And you keep reinventing yourself and you're ready. How do you stay relevant to advise the next generation of entrepreneurs?
I was not a networking guru. I was a pretender back then.
Okay.
Because I have learned now. The technology is incidental. The technology is incidental. You can hire people smarter than yourself. And I had a guy who was a PhD from MIT and who was at Gerard Spot as my consultant. I mean, he worked for me at Epsilon, Dr. J. Israel. So I spoke only after I talked to him. So I was not a networking guru. I was a hardware engineer. When I was at Epsilon and transitioning to become a business guy. But the decisions I made, based upon first principles, thinking through. By the way, there was a transition from being an engineer to being a business guy. If you read my blogs, you will see it was very rapid within like 1 year. I have changed my way of thinking. So you have to go back to challenge yourself. Why do you think so? What is the basis of you believing that, right? So I don't like to claim anything, know anything, but I learned very rapidly. I talked to smarter people than me. When I went to Poshmark, I had not done a consumer business. First year, I hardly spoke at the board meetings. But Manish knows that I spoke. Once I started to speak, nobody was able to answer that. My started question with Manish is, why do you say that? Where does it show that in numbers? What is that that I don't know? What is that you see that I don't see? So I would hold his hand to fire. Manish's people would be afraid when I spoke, right? I let Manish answer, but I learned.
Yeah. No, and Kanwal, you're still reinventing yourself. I don't know many people know this or not, but he has created a Silicon Valley quad. At first, I thought it was a Silicon Valley squad, but it is a quad, 4 of them coming together to create a new fund, I think, for entrepreneurs that are.
It's not a fund, it's a syndicate of angel investors. The early stage investing is very risky. You need to do large number of deals. You need to provide enough capital to the entrepreneur. Angels mess it up because they don't provide enough capital. And so what we have done is we have formed a syndicate of about 30 angels. We have pooled our capital. It's not a fund. We're not charging fee and all that. And we have funded very early stage, very risky ventures. We have done 8 of them this year. And the whole it's a very innovative way of funding the raw first-time entrepreneurs. And Manish is part of the Silicon Valley Quad also. The risk is spread over 30 people, but everybody has to set the capital. It's all handshake. There's no signed agreement. But we are spending about $20 to $25 million a year invested in fresh startups.
And I think the last question for Manish. Manish, you have a huge, interesting journey ahead of you. Is there anything you wish to share about Poshmark? I mean, the challenges that you have to navigate, or reality on the ground of finding talent, managing the culture, scaling, growing, going to new markets. I hear you're going to India. Is there anything you can share? I know it's a publicly traded company. And
we can share some of the things that we've recently announced. So we recently launched in India. We launched in Australia early on. So we continue to believe in the geo expansion journey, that our social marketplace is relevant to markets outside US. We've seen early success in Canada. But then the second thing we just recently launched is Brands Closet. We see major brands partnering and bringing in sustainability and circular economy to their brands in partnership with the Poshmark community. And then the fuel of Poshmark community is our sellers. And, when I look at the next decade, I think of the next decade as, people calling it the age of the creator. I'm saying it's the age of the underdog, right? Which is really people who have been working hard in the shadows, in the covers, are really taking center stage. And our goal is to support them as they grow and scale. And that's sort of been our focus from day one. And it's embodied in one of our core values, which is embrace your weirdness. Everyone's unique, everyone's talent. Let's embrace it and let's move forward together.
Thank you, Manish. Thank you, Kanwal, for this joint success and this joint session and taking this time today to talk to us. I know we are out of time, and our next session panelists are here waiting for the stage. So thank you, and look forward to interacting and meeting with you again.
Thank you,
Thanks
Deepthi.
for having us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kanwal. Thank you, Manish. And thank you, Deepthi, for leading through the conversation.